See this toothpick? That pin is very loose in there, flopping all around. Usually on gateways, in my experience, with that pin loose, if you flip it around to the back, you'll see that the pin is completely broken on this end. Well, this power jack actually has a little shield there, a little piece of tape. Let me take that off and see what's under it. Interesting. I'm just trying to figure it out for myself here, guys, and I'll let you know what I'm doing. I'm just testing this pin to see if the pin, where the loose point in this connector is. I'm going to grab the pin with a pair of pliers, then look at the back of the jack here and see if the pin is actually connected anywhere in here. Aha, okay, I see the problem. It's going to be hard to see, but check it out, I'll try. If you look at this pin, that pin that's going straight up there in the jack. You see that pin that's going straight up into the middle of the jack? That pin is not connected. It actually broke off of that center tip there, that center pin in there. That pin in there is actually snapped right at the point. Oops, I flipped it all the way around. It's actually snapped right at the point where that post that's coming up and going in the middle, right at the point where that post is going up and into the back of the jack. It's actually not connecting that pin. That pin snapped right at that point, right at the top part, right in there. So let me do a little bending here and see what we're going to do with this thing. Okay. Okay, here's the thing. What I'm going to do with this to do this repair. One might think that since that pin is busted and not connected to this post anymore, that you need a new power jack. But this is not what I'm going to do, and here's why. This tip in here, although it's loose, is not coming out. It's loose because it's not connected to the post in the back, but I can't pull it out. It's in there pretty tight. So what I'm going to do is just basically replace that post with a piece of wire. And if you use a piece of wire, it's much more advantageous for you because wire is bendable, guys. That post is not going to bend. That post is not bendable. If somebody jars that, hits it too hard, that post is going to break. If I replace that post with a wire, this guy could probably trip over the cord a couple times and the flexibility will be okay. So I'm going to remove that post and put a wire in. That's what I'm going to do right now. Just going to take a pair of pliers and bend the post. I'm actually just going to bend the post back a little bit. Okay, that post is bent back. I'm going to take a pair of, I'm going to take a file now. Here's a file I got at Radio Shack, a small little file, right? And I'm basically going to solder the back of that post, the post I just bent down there, I'm going to solder to the back of the tip and the power jack. So the first thing you want to do is scuff up the points you're going to be soldering things to. You just got to scuff them up a little bit so that the solder sticks to it. I'm just seeing how everything's going to fit together, guys. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay. Alright, so back to filing. Just scuff up. You want to just scuff up what you're going to be soldering to. It's hard to tell. It's going to be real tiny here. I'm just reaching over the end. But you want to scuff up the points of contact. You'll see when I'm done. So that your solder sticks to it. Because you don't want the solder coming off, especially on these repairs, because you're going to have to do the whole thing over again if your solder comes off. In fact, while I'm doing this, I'm going to heat up my soldering iron. Hang on a sec. I just use a Radio Shack 15-watt soldering iron. I think this base was like a couple bucks too. It's like 15 watt. I think this is like $8. This was a couple bucks. So that's what I use for my repairs. Nothing special. Okay, while I'm waiting for that to heat up, does anybody have any questions so far? Any questions or comments? Is the video coming out okay? Are you able to track along okay? Nobody wanted to do the tech debate, Mitch, so I did this instead. In fact, I'm going to be doing these a lot instead of doing the laptop repair videos. Because laptop repair videos, it's taking a lot of work, man, honestly. And I am not like Steven Spielberg, so this will be just as good. And then once I record all these, I'll put them together in a package for everybody. But I might be selling that package, so that might not be free, but these are free for now. Okay, just going to scuff these up a little bit more. I really want to make sure my solder sticks, so I want to just scuff up all my connectors there. Thanks, Mitch. The next show should be how to replace capacitors. Here's the thing. Capacitors rarely are the problem with laptop motherboards. Only one time that actually happened where I replaced a capacitor on a laptop motherboard. Desktop motherboards, yes. And I don't usually replace capacitors on them. I just buy a new motherboard. But we could do that. We'll do whatever you guys want. You guys are the boss. Alright, well, also while we're waiting for the soldering iron to heat up, let me show you something else. Red wire. Black wire. We're not going to be using the black wire. We're going to be using the red. Because we only need to fix the positive point. Now, the tip that we're going to fix is the positive connector. Grounding points are okay. You can look at the back there. Everything's fine. Everything's Everything's soldered to the motherboard just fine. The bad point is right there in the back. That tip is not making connection with that post. So I bent the post down, and I'm basically going to take a piece of wire and solder it from the end of that tip to the post. I'm going to take this red wire and just take a little bit off the end. This will be one end of the wire we're going to use. Twist it up a little bit. So now we got that. We're going to shorten that a little bit. When you're working with these wires with these laptops, see how I made it a little shorter? I don't know if you can see that. The metal part. You don't want to make the metal part, the part that you're cutting out there, too long, because if it's too long, then you have a higher chance of it short-circuiting with something else on the motherboard. So always keep these tips short as you can, and connected right to the spot you want to connect them to without them getting really stretched out. And we're going to cut the piece of wire, a short piece. That'll work right about there. So now we got this size wire here, okay? And then I'm going to expose the other side of the wire. Okay. So now we got a short piece of wire with two short ends exposed. Try to keep those ends short. You don't want to have a lot of wire exposed, like I said, because then you run the risk of short-circuiting something. Okay, now what we're going to do is what's called tinning, I believe. I'm not a soldering professional, so I don't know if that's the correct term, but what I'm going to do is basically put solder on the end of those two exposed points so that when we attach it to the tips and the power jack, that they stick. Instead of trying to just take this and glob and put it to the end of the power tip and then try to glob solder all over it. That's not what I do. I kind of paint the tips of each thing first and then just stick them together. So I'll show you. By the way, this is Radio Shack solder, .032 diameter, 2.5 ounce, 6040. That's the solder I use. It's model number 64-005E. You get that baby at Radio Shack. And I'm going to take the soldering iron, and I'm going to kind of paint the ends, to paint the exposed tips. Just paint them with solder, so there's solder on each of those tips. Okay, one side's done. I'll show you when I'm done with this. You know, get all the extra solder off your soldering iron. I use a piece of Scotch-Brite actually in there. And there's sandpaper under the Scotch-Brite. If I really have to get something off, I use a sandpaper. But if you use sandpaper on your soldering iron, you're going to wear down your tip. So I just use the Scotch-Brite. Now this might look the same to you, but both of those sides now have solder painted on them. So when I attach them to the point that I want to solder together, since there's already solder on the ends here, it'll make a connection. Now I do kind of the same thing with the power jack. I'm going to put solder on both of those ends and then put the wire in between. Another good tool, let me grab it real quick. Another good tool is, these are called helping hands. It's basically a little thing with alligator clips on it, so you can hold things without having four hands. For example, I'm going to put this in there in such a way that, there we go. Now it's sitting there perfectly for me to work on. This was called helping hands. One of them fell off, so it's actually now just a helping hand. I'll do this and I'll show you guys what I did. I'm just soldering here. This is going to come out good, guys. I can feel it. Okay, let me show you what I did. Those points that I was scuffing up earlier while the soldering iron was heating up, I just put solder on those points. I don't know if you can see. I'll try to do it in different angles here. I just put solder on both of those points. So now when I attach the wire, they should just go together real easy. So let me put the wire in there now. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on the soldering iron tip, and then since both ends are already soldered of what I want to solder together, it should all melt together real nice. Okay, soldering's done. Now check out what I did. It should all be not confusing anymore to you. I basically took a piece of wire from the inside of the tip and soldered it to the post that was supposed to be already connected to the tip. See how I kind of made a extension with using the wire? And here's a cool thing about this. The inside of this tip is still loose, right? It's still kind of loose. And when you give it back to the customer, he might be like, what the F? You know, it's loose. It was loose when I brought it in. It's loose, but it's never going to break again because it's connected to a piece of flexible wire, which is connected to a post. So you could jiggle that tip all you want. It's just going to move this wire around a little bit. And if you made a good solder connection, the flexibility of that wire will take care of any jolt you give that thing. Now you just want to test and make sure your solder connections are solid. So you take a big pliers or something and give your wire a little tug. Make sure it doesn't come off. Make sure your solder connections are good. I'm pulling on that wire, it's not coming off. So I know my solder connections are okay. I don't know the gauge of the wire acid burn. This is it. It's like, I got it at Micro Center. It comes in like 10 colors. It's strong enough though to handle the load. Exactly, Al. It's better than the original design. Now you guys who are watching, were you able to follow that? You understand what I did? Because this is how I do almost all my laptop jack repairs if I can. They never break if you do this because that wire gives it flexibility. Now what I'm going to do is bend the post back into the original position. I'm going to bend it back because laptops are tight. Everything in there is a tight fit. And since I bent that post down a little far, there's a piece of metal that might come down when you put the laptop back together that might touch that. So I'm going to try to put it back in its original position. I'll show you what it looks like after I do that. Another great tool is a toothbrush for like cleaning up little areas that might have a little bit of metal, a little bit of solder stuck on them. Let's use a toothbrush. And then you'll see I bent that post back into its original position. Okay? This way that if there's anything that was going to make a short circuit with that, it can't now because this is the way it originally was. The only thing that's like sticking out a little bit now is the wire I attached. But we'll make sure that that wire doesn't interfere with anything. Plus it's shielded, so you're not going to worry about a short circuit with the wire. Alright, let me get the soldering iron out of the way. Put the wires away, we're done with that. Let's take this black shield that was on the back of this thing and put it back. There's a black shield there. Stick that baby back on. And because I took that shield off and it might have lost some of its stickiness, I'm going to put a piece of electrical tape as well, just to make sure. Okay, because you don't want this stuff that you did to interfere with anything else. See, now I got a red piece of tape kind of stuck around. It just wrapped it around the power jack. You don't want anything you did to touch any metal in the laptop and mess anything up. So, yes, Al, good idea. Acid burn, I'm glad you're pleased. I'm glad you're pleased with that. Acid burn, you're saying, oh, you were thinking of unsoldering the post. You could do that. You could unsolder the whole post, take the whole post out. But then you have to attach stuff to the circuit board. Okay, if I took the whole post out, I'd have to attach stuff to that circuit board, and this was easier. The post already has a good connection to the bottom. The post already has a good connection. Normally, acid, that post, under these conditions where the laptop repair or the laptop jack is damaged, that post a lot of time falls right out. The post is actually busted. So actually most of the repairs I do have the post out because it mainly just falls out as soon as you open the computer. But in this case, I took advantage of the fact that the post was still connected. This way you have shorter distance to go. Anyway, it was just my call, but you can do it however you want. It would definitely work. Alright, let's put everything back together, guys. Get the solder out of the way. Wires out of the way. Toothbrush, paintbrushes, electrical tape, file. I like to work with a clean space. Okay. Got this back up here again. And this came out, I don't know where that goes. Oh, there it goes. Take advantage of the fact that you have this computer apart to clean dust out of it. Acid in the chat room asks, do most of those have plugs like that, or do you have to unsolder them from the motherboard? Well, to answer your question, most of the power jacks break in different ways, and I like to try to repair them to replace the whole jack, because a lot of times they already have a solid connection to the motherboard, but there's something else that's wrong with the jack. So you don't really need to replace the whole jack. The way I did this, it basically made this stronger in a way. I mean, it's like if we replaced the jack, the same thing could have happened to his computer as this one. But since we did the fix in this way, we added flexibility to it, which is what those connections need. They need flexibility because they get abused, so abused. So I guess to answer your question, different jacks break in different ways. It's a judgment call. I like to try to use the existing jack that's there and solder wires instead of replacing the jack with posts, because you want something flexible, not rigid. So it's different every time. Let me put this back in. And then it's all a matter of just putting everything back together. There's one little screw holding everything in here. That's in. This connects to here. Okay, what else now? Let's put it back. Try to put it back in the exact sequence you took everything apart.